Hello, everyone, and welcome to our 25th episode of our weekly cyber threat intelligence briefing. Today is November 13th, which is Thoughts in a Shower Day. It's a day I did create, but don't you just love it when you're in the shower and a little voice in your head asks, how many balloons would it take to float a human? Well, I have the answer. You guys are in luck today. It would take over 5,000 balloons to lift a 140-pound person and over 5,700 balloons to lift a 200-pound person. So spread that knowledge throughout your day today. My name is Keith Wojcicki, Global Head of Threat Intelligence. This week, we're joined by Senior Vice President George Glass, Vice President Sarah Becker, and Senior Associate Ryan Hicks, and Analyst Avery Helwig from our Cyber Threat Intelligence team. So let's talk news you can use for November 13th, 2023. So the FBI released a notification on initial access trends within ransomware groups and recommendations on how users can mitigate and reduce the chances of ransomware impacting companies and their environments. In one case, the Silent Ransom Group, or SRG, also called Luna Moth, conducted callback phishing, data theft, and extortion attacks by sending victims a phone number in a phishing attempt, usually relating to a pending charge on the victim's account. And then once the victims called the number, malicious actors directed them to a legitimate system management tool via a link provided in a follow-up email. Then the threat actors used the management tools to install other legitimate system management tools that can be repurposed for malicious activity. Now, we've seen this a lot, but then actors compromise local files and the networks and shared drives, exfiltrate the victim data, and extort the companies. So another update is we're going to talk about the Cisco iOS XE exploitation, which is also known as CVE 2023-20198. There have been more changes to the implant on impacted iOS XE devices. Version 3 of the implant has been deployed since November 3rd, and the Kroll Cyber Threat Intelligence team continues to monitor the activity and will share updates as they become available. So for today, what are we going to cover? We're going to cover all kinds of different things. We're going to talk about an out-of-band alert that we sent out, the SysAid zero-day exploit, exchange vulnerabilities again, and GOOTBOT tool used for following GOOTLOADER, Confluence, and we talked about that earlier. Ryan's going to address Confluence vulnerability. Then Avery's going to discuss a little bit on Veeam, and then Sarah's going to finish everything up with the ransomware roundup. So with that, I'm going to turn over to George.
Thank you very much, Keith. It seems like we're talking about vulnerabilities, very serious vulnerabilities every week in the last couple of months. This one we released an out-of-band for. It's regarding SysAid and a 0-day it was being exploited by KTA 080, also known as CLOP. So this vulnerability was announced quite late on November 8 GMT, and Kroll released an out-of-band CTI bulletin on November 9th. It became pretty clear that SysAid, along with Microsoft, had discovered that this 0-day vulnerability had been used by the CLOP malware operators to gain initial access via a web shell that the vulnerability allowed them to upload, and that sits on the Tomcat web service. Subsequently, the threat actor was able to install a malware loader, which was called user.exe, and that was then used to drop the Gracewire rat, which is well known to be used by CLOP ransomware group, and subsequently Cobalt Strike as well for lateral movement, and so on and so forth. Worth noting here that Gracewire is injected into the spools V process, MSI exec, and SVC host as well. Some very common tactics for the group there. Additionally, the threat actor was observed to delete logs using custom PowerShell tooling to hide their activity. And as we've been discussing on a couple of webinars recently, KTA 080 has obviously displayed the ability to create their own 0-day exploits, quickly pivot to end-day exploits for popular software. In the discussion that I was having with Mr. Scott Downey on the most recent webinar we did, we were thinking that probably it was going to be another MFT application, but it looks like this particular time they've decided to target SysAid. Interesting to note here that KTA 080, that they're back to encryption for impact after a pretty significant period of time just doing data exfil and extortion that way. And some interesting notes from the IOCs that we collected from the SysAid article. That is that the command and control server that the Cobalt Strike beacon connected to, we had been tracking that a particular Cobalt Strike C2 for just over a year or so now, since June 2022. So it seems that they are not reusing infrastructure. Again, cast your mind back, that's sort of how we discovered some of their attacks on MoveIt were actually being tested a couple of years prior. So rotation of infrastructure certainly doesn't seem to matter too much to KTA 080. Just some notes on the vulnerability. Of course, it's exploited in the wild. It currently doesn't have a CVSS score, but I did a quick calculation. I think it's probably either a 9.8 or a 10. And it affects all versions of SysAid on-prem before 23.3.36. So if you're running this particular piece of software, I think it's safe to assume compromise and conduct some threat hunting on those instances and make sure that you update it to that 23.3.36 version. Some more vulnerabilities for you, this time affecting Exchange. So the Zero-Day Initiative released details of 4 vulnerabilities affecting Microsoft Exchange. The vulnerabilities have not been exploited in the wild, and ZDI contacted Microsoft about them in September. And due to the way that Microsoft responded to ZDI, ZDI has decided to make them available with ZDI numbers, not CVE numbers just yet. All of the flaws that they discovered require authentication to exploit. I think that also drove some of the decision making at Microsoft about when the patches for these would land. But interestingly, a Microsoft spokesperson said to Bleep Computer that they've reviewed the reports and found that they'd either already been addressed or do not meet the bar for immediate servicing. Again, probably because they require authentication in order to exploit. A couple of notes here. Gaining generic authentication to a Exchange server is not particularly difficult. We see the reuse and brute force of credentials very, very commonly in our IR casework. And that particular set of vulnerabilities, you see the first one there, could allow an attacker to execute code as system. So could be potentially very, very bad. What we are expecting is that tomorrow, as we're recording this, is Patch Tuesday. So we're expecting to see some references to these vulnerabilities in that Patch Tuesday cycle. But of course, we'll keep everybody updated as and when we see patches for these go live. I think that's it for me. I'll hand back to Keith. Thank you very much.
Thanks, George. Appreciate that. Now, Ryan, you wrote a fantastic article about GOOTLOADER in June. Now, what updates are we seeing now with GOOTBOT and GOOTLOADER?
Yeah, thanks, Keith. And just to provide a halfway break from vulnerabilities before I get back into one, but yeah, so the actors behind a GOOTLOADER campaign have recently been observed deploying a new lightweight tool called GOOTBOT during post-compromise to provide sort of command and control and lateral movement capabilities, and essentially kind of a series of PowerShell scripts, really. And we've previously covered, as you mentioned, Keith, GOOTLOADER in a blog post and various reports, and we typically saw in those cases Cobalt Strike and System BC providing those capabilities. And this partial change to sort of the more custom tooling suggests the actors are seeking a bit more evasion away from kind of well-known tool sets. And the new campaigns start very much the same as before through SEO poisoning with GOOTLOADER. However, soon after the GOOTBOT PowerShell scripts was deployed, beaconing every 60 seconds by default, but that's configurable to the actor. And this really just acts as the command and control initially, similar to where we saw Cobalt Strike before. Also used for some discovery and enumeration on the hosts. And to laterally move, the GOOTBOT was also designed to spread using Windows Remote Management in PowerShell, either through WMI or the invoke command command look within PowerShell. And there have also been instances where SMB was used to transfer the GOOTBOT script to new hosts, where the beacons then get set up to new hosts and kind of spreads from there. And also, it's been observed and being deployed using old techniques to spoof the PowerShell processes arguments. And that's where the process is created in a suspended state with non-malicious arguments. The actor then updates the process in memory with malicious arguments that they want to actually run, and then they resume the process. These both add to its sort of lightweight nature, and also the fact that GOOTBOT is they're looking to sort of be perhaps more evasive in terms of getting away from those well-known toolsets, as I mentioned. When they're going about the kind of GOOTLOADER campaign, so certainly keeping an eye on how GOOTBOT evolves and GOOTLOADER campaigns evolve into the end of this year. Next up, unfortunately, I'll go back to vulnerabilities again. So just to provide an update on a vulnerability we covered last week in Confluence 22518, which impacted all versions or impacts all versions of Confluence on-premise. So Atlassian updated their advisory disclosing that threat actors were already targeting the vulnerability following the release of the exploit that we mentioned last week. And these attacks involved the Cerber or Cerber ransomware. Rapid7 also noted these attacks against their customer base, as well as the use of the another Confluence vulnerability 22515. During these attacks, they observed post-exploitation command execution to download malicious payload, which was the Cerber ransomware deployment. And just notably there at the bottom, CISA, the FBI, and the MS ISAC, which is the Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center, they issued a joint advisory urging network administrators to secure Confluence servers against these known actively exploited bugs. So kind of a catch-all really for a number of different vulnerabilities that we've seen recently against Confluence. They've sort of decided to kind of push out a big advisory warning of these sort of ongoing threats to Confluence servers. So yeah, really prioritizing patching, of course, for this vulnerability and others related to Confluence. I mentioned the 22515, which is slightly older, but yeah, very much under active exploitation. We'll of course continue to monitor and make any updates. That's all from me. I'll hand back to Keith.
Thank you, Ryan. Over to Avery. Avery, I know Veeam's released hot fixes to address vulnerabilities with maximum security ratings. So what are you seeing in the trenches?
Yes. Yeah, so Veeam released hot fixes to address 4 vulnerabilities in the Veeam ONE IT monitoring platform. Out of the 4 vulnerabilities, 2 of them were severe and rated at 9.9 and 9.8 respectively. The other 2 were of medium severity. So the first vulnerability addressed was CVE 2023 38547, which was the 9.9 critical rating, and according to Veeam, allows an unauthenticated user to gain information about the SQL Server connection Veeam ONE uses to access its configuration database. This may lead to remote code execution on the SQL Server hosting the Veeam ONE configuration database. So the second vulnerability, CVE 2023 38548, was rated at a 9.8. And allows an unprivileged user to acquire the NTLM hash of the account used by the Veeam ONE reporting service. The next 2 vulnerabilities Veeam addressed are of medium severity and include CVE 2023 38549 and CVE 2023 41723. The first of the 2 lets attackers with power user roles steal the access token of an admin through a cross-site scripting attack. And there are no reports of active exploitation of this vulnerability. And then lastly, CVE 2023-41723, can be exploited by threat actors with the read-only user role and enables access to the dashboard schedule. There are no current reports of active exploitation of that one either. There are fixed versions that have been released, and we can refer to the slide for those. But we do recommend immediately stopping Veeam ONE monitoring and reporting services and replacing those existing files with the new files provided in the build-specific hotfixes, restarting the services, and then resuming operations as normal. Back to you, Keith.
Thank you, Avery. I appreciate that. Now, let's grab our attorney hobby horse and gallop over to Sarah's corner to talk about Ransomware Roundup. Sarah?
Thanks, Keith. First up, we're going to talk about the threat actor FAR network. They've been connected to at least 5 different ransomware campaigns. This threat actor has been active since at least 2019, and they have been operating under various aliases and have mostly been providing their skill sets to ransomware as a service campaigns. Researchers believe that this threat actor has been linked to campaigns for JS Worm, Karma, Nemty, and Nephilim. FAR Network also set up their own ransomware as a service operation called Nokuyawa. This operation allows affiliates to have the convenience of accessing different corporate networks via a botnet. And then the benefit of this program too allows affiliates to receive 65% of the ransomware payout, while botnet owners get 20%, and then the ransomware owner gets 15%. So currently the Nokuyawa leak site has 35 victim companies. There was a researcher who kind of tried to infiltrate FAR Network's operations on this just to ascertain more details. And according to the researchers, they said the candidates wanting to join FAR Network's ransomware as a service program based on the Nokuyawa must complete a test assignment. So for the purpose of the test, FAR Network provides several compromised corporate account credentials. Those are login and passwords, just to facilitate privilege escalation within the targeted network. So successful candidates must execute privileges and then use the ransomware to encrypt the victim's files, which then they need to demand payment for the decryption. We are keeping up to date on this, but it is nice to see some of these researchers go ahead and try to go under the radar just to get more information about these kinds of campaigns. And then next up on our next slide, we are back talking about ransom VC. So I know last week we discussed that this operation was up for sale. So they're back and they're saying that they are claiming a final project. And then they also started disclosing information about their affiliates. So on November 7th, they posted on their Telegram channel that they are looking to hire people for one last project. That post said, Ransom VC is going to hire people for one last time for a private project outside of Ransom VC activity. If you have malware development skills or penetration testing skills, please let us know. Then again, the next day on November 8th, they posted again to their Telegram channel with claims that 6 of their affiliates have been arrested, which kind of supports the reasoning behind shutting down their operation. So in this post, they said, within my investigation, I found that 6 people affiliated with me may have been arrested. In this way, I'm putting an end to this. The profit we made isn't worth the ruining of lives of any of our affiliates. All of our 98 affiliates are now officially fired. We are sorry for the not so long operation of the group, but it happened to be some of the kids can't have normal OPSEC. I cannot do anything about it. I earned good with them, but using newly born kiddies at the age of 20 is just not right in my eyes. They will end up in prison anyways, but I do not wish to continue all of this that will support their stupidness. We do not regret any of our breaches nor ransoming any of our customers and clients. We have done more than anyone else will within such a small period of time, but this is because we used to hire anyone at any age without any particular skills within his OPSEC. It's mostly their fault, but I do not want them to use my projects as a podium to get caught. Have fun, little hacksters. Cheers. So again, we're monitoring this Telegram channel just to see what keeps popping up. They may start talking more about their final project. I don't know if they're going to start talking more about their affiliates, but we are monitoring this. That's all for me, Keith.
Thank you, Avery, and a big thank you to everybody that's taken the time to tune in to Kroll's weekly cyber threat intelligence briefing. We hope you found this session informative. If you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to contact the team at cti@kroll.com. We hope you enjoy the rest of the day and tune into next week. Thanks, everyone. Take care.